we have a giveaway. So all you need to do is subscribe to our channels. So link down below, it will be Dr. Pete's channel. Yes, we will be giving away the AOS Diet book. And so if you're a Christian, this is huge because this aligns with your spiritual life and also your physical life. And it'll affect everything else, your mental health, your energy levels. Some of you might have weight goals. And this is just a byproduct of that. This episode is brought to you by our Revo Report Patreon. Join our community to get first access to interviews, Bible study guides, devotionals, and prayer books for adults, youth, families, and marriages. Plus, resources on Christian living, leadership, sermon prep, exclusive Q&As, online Bible studies, and even one-on-one coaching or counseling. Visit patreon.com/Vince Revo and grow in faith and truth with us. ER doctor or emergency medicine doctor, family man, 4 kids, author of the AOS Diet. I'm actually in that fasted state right now. And so are you, I bet, right?
Yeah. The window hasn't opened yet for me today anyway. So I'm going a little bit, 2 more hours more. How about you? What's your window today? Do you have a mark in mind?
Yeah, it's so I'll probably around 6 or 7 so I can eat with the family, have dinner with the family. Yeah. But yeah, why don't we go ahead and get started? Pete, anything you'd like to say as we get into some of the questions that we missed last time?
Yeah, just a bridge to the audience from the last podcast that we had together, which was just a few weeks ago. It was really great. We talked for about an hour and we described this unique tradition of fasting as it goes back to antiquity and is many times in the Bible. And some people take it seriously, others don't. But as we started to explore what fasting meant and why God would utilize that, given that the center of ourselves very well might not just be our brain, but also our enteric nervous system that lies in the intestine. We talked about the physiology behind that, the anatomy behind it, building this case that if you're really trying to make a movement or make a change in the trajectory of this ship, you need to know what drivers are the most key and the most visceral, most core. And we're making this argument that part of that core or that measure might be something to do with our digestion. And as we explored how our sympathetic nervous system is affected and energy levels and mechanisms of healing are turned on, we also concluded then with this very interesting study called the ACE study, where we recognize that if bad things can have a physical effect in terms of lifespan and future success of a child at a young age, what can good things do to the longevity of a child? And one of those things that I was recommending, given our discussion, was fasting. So maybe not in terms of the greatest severity that I'm recommending in the AOS Diet, but essentially saying that kids basically after the age of 7 should probably eat no more than 12 hours a day. And then going vegan in this sort of cycle of the church's liturgical calendar, which is basically Wednesday, Fridays, and some weeks leading up to big feast days, is not a bad thing. And proof is in the pudding. I did it myself at 7. I didn't admit, but at the same time, I wanted to emphasize that there's something very key about teaching a child who does not have this sort of cerebrum of a 27-year-old or of an adult for us to say, hey, how do we teach a child what it means to be non-judgmental when other kids are eating? How do we teach a child to be patient when others are enjoying themselves in a certain way, to be disciplined when others are not, delay gratification, all these things? And given those lessons you learn viscerally through your core at a young age, what things can you feed in? What companies can you start? Projects can you begin? Friendships you can manage that are based on real things. All of this is a recipe for success in any endeavor. Why not start that as young as possible?
Yeah, that was brilliant. I was even talking to my wife about that in starting that with the kids. And I was talking about a delay of gratification and how that is big for kids these days who have instant gratification. We live in a fast food, watch whatever I want to watch in that moment, right? And I want to touch on what we were talking about just before we went live. And that's you were talking about diminishing returns. Because I think a lot of people are out there not only concerned about obviously diet and being healthy, but being healthy, being wealthy. And what were we talking about earlier about that?
Yeah, I think in general, we live in a society that really markets hyperbole. So we don't want to just want to know who the fastest guy in the town is or the fastest guy in the state. We want to know who the fastest guy is in the world, and we want to see him fly. And that's a really unnatural sort of experience if you think about it. For millions of years, arguably, you probably were like the fastest kid in the village. You probably were the strongest guy in the valley, the best singer in the mountain pass, whatever you want to describe it. Like now we care examples all over the world. And we also tend to market products and tools towards that end. And when we talk about diminishing returns, I always like to make this funny example where if you like steak, you can get New York strip for $25 a pound. But if you really want a good steak, you can get Kobe beef for $250 a pound. The point is that New York strip isn't 20, I guess it would be 10 times, isn't 10 times less delicious than Kobe beef. It's maybe like percent less delicious at diminishing returns. So the money does not reflect the increase in satisfaction. And when we talk about salary, there was a study actually it was some time ago, over 10 years, but they basically said at that time, and I know things have changed, but add on whatever inflation you want to add on. But basically, if you made $75,000 a year in America 10 years ago, you were at par with happiness and satisfaction as people who made 5 times that. But who made half 75,000 was indeed half as happy. So at 75,000, that's the diminishing returns mark, where if you make more, yes, you're a little bit more happy, but there comes a diminishing returns with that. So if you can imagine making $500,000 a year, they're not 75%, or I guess you would say 8 times more happy than the guys making 75,000. And it comes with a whole bunch of baggage with it. But it's something to think about really in everything, because so much of American society, or Western society, I should say, is marketed towards being the 0.1%, really, and not just part of you're not just a tall guy. You have to be the tallest guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The recipe for absolute dissatisfaction, really.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the fact that it's not linear, I guess I could follow up in asking, how do you see this when it comes to health, or when it comes to just having those energy levels, maybe that you've experienced, or maybe that other people have experienced who have communicated with you going through the AOS diet? And so some people really I want to get to 5% body fat, but at some point also there's diminishing returns, right? I want to get to a healthy weight, not too much, and I think your body will regulate itself. One of the things I notice with fasting is that my body will regulate my weight if I do intermittent fasting, and it won't go lower than that. There's a limit. Is that something that you've studied in the past, or do you have anything to say about that?
Again, I think as we scale this up, let's say we had a whole Christian country that said, you know what, we're going to do fasting Jesus style, the proper Christian style. What would that society look like? And it would probably be a very healthy society with grandparents that live into their 90s who are clear of mind and are functional and are still helping out with picking up toddlers and might even make dinner for everyone. The opposite extreme, which is just so ironic, is we live in America now where we've given up on a lot of those practices of delayed gratification, and we love instant gratification. We want more of it as much as we can. It's like we might even demand it. And as a result, and I mentioned this before, but 100 million people in America have diabetes or prediabetes. There's a huge wave of people who, given the fact that so many have diabetes, who are going to have dementia. Some of them call dementia type 3 diabetes. There's just such a connection. And as the baby boomers do become senior citizens, and a lot of them are, and our ERs are packed, our hospitals are packed. I just posted an article today about bed shortages across the country. But essentially, we are having people who have become very high utilizers. Their youth and, let's say, good genetics are not keeping up with the bad lifestyle any longer. And as their age magnifies things, and we take this to scale, there's going to be big problems. Now, you might say, hey, the baby boomers, they're one of the wealthiest generations in the world. But the reality is that we spend $5 trillion a year in America alone on healthcare, and we're $37 trillion in debt, and we're paying, I think, nearly $1 trillion a year in interest. And that is a spiraling problem. You can't throw money at everything and solve your problem. There just aren't people, human beings, and buildings to house every person that might need a dementia unit coming forward. And that's a scary thing. So if we stop talking about how do we get 1 million people out of the 8 billion in the world perfect health through expensive diets and special tools and outrageous amounts of time dedication towards that goal, possible. But 1 million people among 8 billion is like 0.1% and less than that. How do we get 8 billion people? Or let's just talk about America for a second. How do we get 350 million people a certain baseline of health where we can sidestep 80 to 90% of disease. Of course, there'll always be congenital things, genetic things.
Mhm.
And that is very possible through something as universal and as meek and humble and Christian as fasting. And this is why I think something like the AOS Diet, which teaches the world proper Christian fasting, while it's a spiritual practice, it will save the country. It really will. And I think a lot of that starts with having the right expectations and the right framing of what we're after, because we're not trying to get everyone 5% body fat. What we're trying to do is make them
Right.
attractive to the house, make them functional, make them look like heroes to their kids, and then they can participate in a wide range of activities. And that's not a bad world. That's not a bad world.
Wow. I was just looking up some of the data here.